Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's group call for Tactical Sovereignty. This is the Matrexit discussion group call. And tonight's title for the call was FAQs, Frequently Asked Questions. I had somebody that said they would like to do this, and I thought, what a great opportunity, because when I first started learning and researching and looking at things, I saw a lot of different people trying to do a lot of different things, didn't see a whole lot of things working, and I saw a lot of things, really, quite frankly, that did not make sense at all, according to what I had learned. And it wasn't because what I had learned was a bunch of lies and falsehoods, because we know those do exist, but I saw things that just did not line up with the way things really work. And so I got rid of listening to all the wannabe gurus or whatever there are out there, because there's tons of them. Listening to one the other day that supposedly has students and he's teaching, but all the stuff he's teaching is all of the fallacies that people first learn when they get into, say, this truth movement or whatever you want to call it. Where we start looking at the other side. How is there another way to live? Is there something else that we really should be doing that would make our lives a lot smoother? And so, like I said, I quit listening to them, and I went in and actually kind of backdoor started listening to the experts and things like that to see what the attorneys were talking about with each other. What retired judges were talking about. Started actually reading the laws for what they had laid out, instead of guessing at them from my perspective of how things are, because our perspective is very, very false. But anyway, the guest that was going to be here isn't here, so we've got another friend with us this evening, Tracy, and she's been looking at the same thing a lot of people have been looking at lately, that kind of goes in cycles. Every 3-4 years, certain things bounce back up again, such as going through the Treasury to do things or getting a diplomatic status. That's something that cycles around. And these things cycle around because people that are brand new to all of this start seeing some of these things from the past. And so they bring them up as if they've found something brand new when it's far from back brand new. A lot of things I've seen were things that people were doing back in the 80s and the 70s and getting nowhere with, other than maybe a vacation at the Gray Bar Hotel. So anyway, I don't know a whole lot about Tracy. So Tracy, why don't you let us know where you claim to hail from, and what this has been like for you.
Well, I mean, you guys do know me from the past. I had my Facebook account hacked, and so I couldn't get my name on because they took my stuff. But yeah, I used to do videos too under Trabian, and this has been a 6 year long journey for me. Started off in family court and realized something was horribly wrong there. Found someone who mentored me a little bit, who was really knowledgeable in the beginning phase, and then just kind of, I guess, wanted to know the truth for the rest of that journey. And so, like you were saying, there were so many people out there with so many different ideas, so many different directions, so many different applications. And I'm like, which ones am I supposed to use? It gets confusing. You get so many different options that there's too many options. And then it comes down to, well, now you just kind of have to go with the guy that sounds good or whatever you like. And then eventually I got sick of that too. I'm like, okay, this isn't working. I need to read for myself. And pretty much vested, I don't know, about 16 hours a day for about 4 years straight. It was insane. I got obsessed with seeking truth. But over the years, I've helped people, I've advocated for people, I've gotten myself arrested on purpose just to see if what I've learned is adequate. Lots of stuff has gone on. So, yeah, lots of court cases, some of what people might call the private side dealings, whatever. A lot of success, actually. So, I thought it would be interesting. So like I said, I see people all the time getting involved in these processes, and I cannot make heads or tails of why they're doing these processes. It drives me insane. What are we doing? What's our objective? What's our goal? And if you don't know the answer to that, then why are you doing it? There's a lot of stuff going on out there right now. Like you were saying, the stuff that I saw 6 years ago that I thought kind of went away. And then all of a sudden you're seeing it reintroduced, and this excitement reignited about it. W-9 process, like we were talking about earlier, demurs. Like, when did these things go away? I don't know. So that's a questions that I've seen out there, but I don't know what people generally are doing. I have kind of been out of the equation for a little while. I took a little break for about a year to work on other things. So I don't know. Like I said, the biggest thing I see going on right now is like this W-9 craze, which that was when I started. They were talking about that. It was a little different of a process, though.
Right. Yeah. A lot of the processes have been things like endorsing the birth certificate and sending it to the Treasury. And after that, I never really heard what was supposed to happen after you do that. But
It's
yeah,
magic. There's a lot of So my understanding of it, there's a speculation that somebody knows, somebody in Treasury who said that this is how you do things, and if you do things this way, you will be free. So that's usually what I hear about it. I don't know if you've heard anything different.
yeah. And one of my first questions with that would be, okay, wait a minute. So what you're doing is now, I mean, everybody had kind of contracted originally, through W-4s, W-2s, or whatever when they went and got a job. So now you're contracting with them in a different way, but you're still contracting with them. So where does this freedom come from?
Well, here's the thing. So when people want to pull out of the system, you want to exit the system and be considered some say call it a private citizen. Some people call it a secured party creditor. But ultimately, I think the goal is that you just want to be left alone. I think I would assume that's the objective.
Right.
Exiting the system's not a good idea. And I know a lot of people are going to hate me for saying this, but not everybody is equipped to exit the system. So when I see people compelling others to, oh, well, go expatriate. Remember when they were doing all that nonsense?
Right.
Or, don't show up to court, or all these things that people tell them to do. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. I don't think people really recognize how dependent on the system they are. So when you have police coming to you, say you want to call the police because someone's breaking in your house and attacking you, that's a service you will not be entitled to if you are not a member or a partner with the state for federal programs. This part of their job is charitable service. It is under the community caretaking function. The only duty that a police officer actually has is to make an arrest, a seizure, a stop. In other words, if I see you getting beat up and it's a crime to beat someone up, I can stop you from getting beat up. What you're not entitled to is justice. Justice is also a service under the Judiciary Act. The states have no duty and no obligation to help you seek justice. This is another service you depend on. So how are you going to get anything done if a citizen harms you? If you look at the Constitution is very specific, friends. State against state, state against the United States, or citizen against the state. Nothing in there gives you a service if you have a controversy that you want resolved with a fellow citizen. That comes from the Judiciary Act. And if you're not using your social security number, if you're not willing to participate in social services as such, then you are not entitled to seek justice in those courts against someone who robs you, steals your stuff. You're not allowed to enter into the DMV contract where if someone steals your car, the state will locate it for you, the police will recover it for you. These are special services. Are you willing to let those go? The food services that you get, FDA food services, the grocery store is first and foremost a service of the FDA, right? If you're not growing your own, if you're not, making your own meat, if you're not doing any of those things, you're relying on a government service to approve the food that goes to market and is sold to you in commerce at the grocery store. This is what it means to disconnect yourself from the system. And I can go on for hours about all the various services people may not realize that they're entitled to use because of Social Security Act, because of your willingness to partner with the state, because of these adhesion contracts and all of these things. We are super reliant and dependent on many things that we don't realize come directly from the state. So before you determine, I'm going to expatriate or I'm going to pull out of the system, don't use their stuff, don't use their titles, don't use their statuses. You better not be a victim. What is a victim? Someone who cannot defend themselves, someone who is in need of protection from the FDA because they don't know how to read labels. They don't know how to identify bad food or bad sellers or snake oil. You can't be a consumer if you cannot have a status. Some people are equipped for this. Some people are like, you know what? I'm going out to the mountains. I'm going to build myself my own little castle. I'm going to grow my own food. But if you're not that guy, how do you survive? How do you survive if you cannot engage in any commerce at all whatsoever? And if they do away with cash, which it looks like they're trying to do, that would mean that you wouldn't even be able to go to the grocery store and make a purchase without being noticed. You know what I mean? If they do some sort of cryptocurrency style of currency, whatever, they're going to make it so like, hey, I don't know if you've seen the Amazon stores, but like you use electronic cards to get your purchases done in Amazon groceries. So if cash were to be eliminated and you are not able to do commerce because you've checked out of the system, how are you eating? So this is kind of a big deal.
Well, and I like you brought up the fact of not everybody is equipped to do it, because that's hugely important. And go back to the things that we see rotate around every now and then. One of them is people want to get rid of the Social Security number. Well, number one, and I've looked deeply into this, not because of my desire to do it, because I just want to see what it was all about. And I think there was if I remember right, like a 526 form or something that was being shared around. And so I went and looked at it, and I did something most people don't do. I went and looked up the instruction form that goes along with it. And you quickly learn, and I'm not saying it's specifically the 526, but it's a number, something like that, 3-digit number. But if you go and read the instruction form on it, you quickly learn that what that is for someone who, say, has become disabled and they get a disability judgment and they start receiving benefits and decide, oh my gosh, actually I found this other job that I can do, but I'll be making way too much money to keep receiving state funds or federal funds. And so they fill that form out to have those funds stop being sent to them. That's what that's for. It's to stop an action already occurring. And so when I have people contact me about, getting rid of the Social Security number and things like that, and that's one of their goals, I ask them, okay, I said, do you have a Roth IRA or something like that set up? Do you have some investments set up? Are you potentially going to be getting a pension if we retire from your job? Which I think there's very, very few places that offer pensions anymore. But I ask them, what do you have in place for when you turn 65 or whatever the case may be? And it's that point where they're kind of like a deer in the headlights. It's like, well, that was why Social Security was formed, was because, much like you, most people don't plan for their future. They don't set up anything for the future, that they're not going to have anything they can fall back on. And so therefore the state set that up so you'll be paying into that Ponzi scheme over your lifetime, and you'll be getting
world's worst investment.
Right. And so it'll take part of the load off the state when you retire. And so, yeah, but most people just are not equipped for it at all. And now you mentioned, what would happen if your car got stolen or, somebody attacks you or something. And there's going to be the largest number of people that would say, oh, well, I always keep my car locked, or I don't have a car, or I keep protection with me, so I don't have to worry about anybody doing anything to me. Everybody always thinks it's the other guy that these things are going to happen to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
When in reality, that's not reality. These things can possibly happen, but hey, okay, good. What if none of those things do happen? You're still going to have that one issue that every single individual is going to face called retirement. What do you do then? Because you need a regular flow of money coming in all the time. Once that goes, once that dries up, then where are you at?
Yeah, I always tell people when they're venturing out to do these things, I'm like, are you not planning on taking that retirement? Because they're not going to give you your money back, right? Like if you're going to cancel out, expect nothing in the end. You cancel it, that's fine, but you don't get your retirement income, you don't get Medicaid, you don't get any money back that you vested in. So consider that first before you make these decisions. And many
Yep.
people that I come across and talking to about this will say, I should still get my retirement. No, you don't get that if you check out. It doesn't work that way. They're going to tell you that too. Like I've actually read cases, and there's actually a bill that was introduced into Senate for people who wanted to expatriate. And basically, in a nutshell, is well, if they want to, let them. Let's stop trying to prevent their expatriation. Let's stop trying to prevent their leaving the system. So at some point, they might just start saying, okay, you want to leave the system? Good luck. And if you do that, that's going to be so crazy. It would be horrible to deal with.
Well, one of the things I pay attention to, whether we see issues going on that we think are fraudulent or whatever the case may be, I look at basically the scientific method. Is it repeatable? Is it observable? Is it measurable? You know what I mean? And so when I see things that are consistent across the board and happen in every situation, well, okay, I take that as being this is something factual. And everyone that I've seen that has tried to do something regarding getting rid of the Social Security number, for instance, they always get the same answer from the Social Security Administration. Because number one, you cannot cancel or get rid of something that you did not create. They created that number, that they created that situation, not you. So there's nothing you can do to, like, all of a sudden, poof, it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't work that way. The one thing that they always do and they always tell people is the same answer. They say, just quit using it. That's all you can do. Just quit using it.
Or you could read your tail off, stop listening to other people, and invest your time and use their shit against them. That's what I do. Like I am not someone who is afraid to use their stuff. So, and I have not had any problems. As a matter of fact, life has gotten far better for me since learning these things. Like I use their stuff all the time. I just use it to my benefit. And I just make
And
sure that they are not going to benefit fully like they normally do.
and you know what? And like you said, you need to start researching and reading and studying this stuff, because one of the things I want to do, and I want you to go into kind of lay out, the one, two, threes of how you use it in your benefit, because that can be done, and that is what I suggest. But I want to go over several things first, so that a lot of people run into as a newbie or something we might call them a greenhorn, or but when you first realize that this whole system isn't really set up quite the way you think, because it's not. It's really set up more for the peasant. It's set up more for the serf or the slave. And if you keep doing the same thing everybody else does, then you're going to do exactly what they want, and
Welcome
that
to the
is
plantation.
right. Be on the plantation, and you're going to remain a serf or a slave, a denizen, whatever the case may be. But when people first get out, this is what boggles my mind. They see that, number one, in school you weren't taught these things. All right, the things that you really need to know to survive, they're not taught to you. And much of what gets taught to us is very false and very incorrect, especially when it comes to history. And so they go out and start looking, and they find different people in whatever flavor of the truth movement they're looking into. And the first things they find, they latch right onto it, like, oh, they found gold. All of a sudden, now they found the truth. Well, wait a second. Why are you so quick to believe hogwash coming from people that you don't know from Adam? And knowing social media, 5 months from now, they're going to have disappeared anyway. You're so quick to believe them as being, the factual truth. They've given you the gold. They've given you the keys to the kingdom. You know what I mean? When what you've been taught all your life that you had believed in so firmly, you found out was false. Why are you going to jump on the first thing you come across? And you hear people talking about like getting access to Sesame K Trust, for instance.
I
Or one of the worst words that's out there is that word strawman. I was listening to a guy the other day, and somebody had turned me on. They're like, "Oh, check this guy out." I guess they thought he was really good or whatever. Within like 2 3 minutes, I thought my ears were bleeding because he's
oh
talking
yeah.
about the SK Trust. He's talking about
Hmm.
your straw man, which is an extremely dangerous word or term to be using because that's not really quite exactly
You
the
know what?
situation.
Before you go on with that, as a good faith offer to help people understand that Brian is not trying to burst your bubbles here, I'll tell you exactly where to find the account and how to locate it right now. And it's not as hard as they say. If you have a contract, you got to read the contract before you start reading the law. Let me just put that out there as a little hint. So, for example, if you have signed a, how do you call those things again? The parent agreement plan, not parent agreement, no. Oh yeah, for the child support security. If you sign one of those things, you're gonna find a number on it. That number is actually what's known as a QSIP number. You can go to the Fidelity website and you could put the QSIP number in the Fidelity website. It will pull up the account for you. That account is not what you think it is. What you're going to find in there is a bunch of investments, actually. It's an investment portfolio where investors put money in on you. So, for example, 2006, I was diagnosed with portal vein thrombosis, for which they gave me 12 months to live. During that time, I had to take Coumadin and Lovenox, which was provided to me by Roche Medical. In that account that I pulled up on Fidelity, Roche Medical was an investor to the tune of like $20 million worth in 2006 at the time I was ill. Another thing inside of that account was a car loan that I had taken from Harris Bank and another one from Toyota. So there was no denying that that was an account that was associated to my person because these were all familiar loans and things I took. So if you want to go find that, you guys got to look at your contracts, not at the law. The contracts have your account numbers on them. A QSIP number, if I recall, it's been a long time. I think it's like a letter, a number, a letter, like two numbers, and then four numbers. I think that's how it was set up, but it's been like years. I did a video showing it at one point. But yeah, if you think that account is just like, hey, let me just go and get some money out of it or pay it, I highly recommend first you go look it up and see what's in it before you make that decision. And that's how you locate the account. But sorry, go ahead, Brian. That one drives me nuts. I had to throw that out there.
Yeah, and you made a very good statement there as well. You said that look at the contract before you go and start looking at the laws. And there's a very good reason for that. And that is because the contract makes the law.
Yep.
Look at what is going on within the court system. I don't really care what type of case it is. You can present any case to me that you want that goes into court. In every single situation, there is a contract in place, and
Yep.
someone has broken the contract, and the state is doing nothing but enforcing the contract.
Pretty much, yeah, 100% of the time. I think where people get confused is that there are various forms of contract. A contract is not necessarily in written form. So That's another one where people go. I don't know if they're still doing this today, but they used to go in and say, "Just tell them where's the contract at. I don't have a contract." You're making yourself look like you're operating in bad faith. Like, let's say you're there on a traffic ticket and you have a driver's license, and now you go in there and say, "Where's the contract?" You have what's called an implied contract, which is basically if a moral duty exists. This is where your statutes all come from. Does a moral duty exist? We don't always know that simply because somebody wrote it down, but inherently in our nature, every day we accept duties and obligations. For example, a mother gives birth to a child. The first thing she does is place the baby onto her breast to feed the baby. Why? Why does she do that? Because she not only knows that the baby needs food, but she must accept that she has a moral duty to provide.
That's a law of nature.
Exactly. Natural law, or what they normally call social compacts. This social compact creates a presumption that all mothers must feel, or at least good people must feel, this sense of duty and obligation to the child. Therefore, by ordinary case doctrine, they will presume all mothers have accepted that duty day one based on their expression, the norm, so to speak, the majority rule. So to learn more about that, you can go to Sessions versus DeMaya. I think it was in 2018. And Justice Gorsuch explains ordinary case doctrine very, very well. And he talks about ordinarily someone will adopt this sort of feeling or burden at the same time, because every time you take on a duty, you take on a burden. Mother-child relationship, from the spiritual perspective, like you said, natural law, this creates a moral duty spiritually. We don't know that. We can't see it. We can't touch it. But we know some people have it. Is it ordinary? Is it extraordinary? Is it something every mother is equipped with just because she lives and breathes the same air? Or are there some mothers who don't have that duty in their hearts? How do we know if a mother did not accept such duty? Well, she won't carry a burden of guilt if she doesn't feed the baby, will she? If she didn't accept the duty and didn't think it was her job and didn't intend on feeding the baby or taking care of the baby, it's as simple as not doing it. And she won't feel a thing about it. No sorrow, no sadness. And that's how we compare natural law social compacts to what you think of as being a business contract for profit or gain. These are two different things. So presumptive law, the reason the statute presumes you're guilty of parental neglect or something like that is based on the ordinary case doctrine. So everybody should be reading that before someone tells you what to do or not to do in any specific circumstance, and come to know it very well so that you don't, if you want to rebut the presumption, then you rebut ordinary case doctrine as they did in Sessions v. DeMaya.
Well, you know what, Trey, let's go down that road, because like I said, there's so many of these things that people first come across, and it's easy to believe everything or anything that's thrown at you when it's brand new to you, when you don't have any base knowledge for it. And that's what I was saying. People hear about the Sedicate Trust, or they hear about the Strawman, or they hear about admiralty law, or that they see you as dead. They turn you into a corporation. They turn you into a dead entity. But people that don't have any base knowledge easily pick up on this stuff. And I hear people regurgitating this. And oh my gosh, it's painful to listen to. But at the heart of this also is contract. It's like I say, the contract makes the law. And when people ask what to research, I tell them, number one, you need to comprehend contract law, and you need to comprehend the law of agent and principal. Yeah. Because those things will make up a huge chunk of all of this.
Agreed.
So let's talk about contracts for a second here, because that lays at the heart of it. And this is something that I see so many people, even claim teachers, don't have any idea about contract law. You brought up implied contract. That's one type of contract that's out there, right? And natural law in itself is a contract that you've made with nature when either we decided to be here or we just somehow magically that spark made us appear here.
Yeah.
That
Well,
divine spark.
it's like this. If you take something, you have to replace it. You have to give something back.
Yeah, we've become a part of this, whether we like it or not, really. And so you hear a lot of people talk about, now you mentioned somebody going in a court over a driver's license. Well, where's the contract? Well, they actually have something that you signed, your name's on it.
And they
And
share it in a database.
right, and a lot of people in that situation will say, "Oh, whoa, contract has to be two parties. There's only one signature there."
No,
That's not true.
nope. Not true at all.
And in fact, the majority of contracts that we enter into, nobody signs them
Mm-hmm.
because an offer has been put out there and you've accepted the offer. Well, if I open the door so a young lady can walk through, what's happened? I've made an offer. What happens when she walks through the door? She's accepted the offer. That's a very simple way of seeing how these contracts happen with us on a day-to-day basis. People
You know, my
say,
favorite one on that is you've probably read this because I think all of us, at least in our time, have read it about the restaurant implied contract from a restaurant.
"Yep,
You sit down and eat. Nobody signed anything. You think you're free to walk out without paying? Where's
right,
the contract?
absolutely."
Where's the contract? No, you can't. And the thing is, you're making a booty of yourself because a lot of times they actually have the contract, not because it's like in a written form instrument on the record and evidence, but because if you have a population where 100% signed a DMV contract, you think they don't know that?
You remind me of a you remind me of a situation that I was in a number of years ago, Trey, where um, I had been working in one restaurant, managing it, and had fired an employee. Well, one of the other restaurants, kind of a sister restaurant inside the group, had hired that employee. And I happened to go to that restaurant to eat one evening. And I didn't see her. She saw me, and she purposely screwed up my order from the kitchen. And when it came out and the waitress put it in front of me, I was like, "What's this?" She said, "Well, they gave this to me. This was on the order." And I said, "No." I said, "That is not what I ordered at all." And so that this other employee who was working in the kitchen was like, "Oh yeah, this is my chance to get back at Brian, right?" So they called the police because I wasn't paying for it. And the police came and they said, "Well, what's the situation?" And I explained, "I ordered such and such. This is what the kitchen put out. This is not what I ordered, and I haven't touched it." And the police said to the waitress, they're like, "Is that true? Has he ate anything?" She's like, "No, he hasn't even touched it yet." And he said, "Fine. He doesn't have to pay for it."
No execution.
No execution, no performance has occurred, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
in the chat here, John says that courts don't like to deal with implied contracts. Oh, they love them. They get off on them. I swear to God, it's a super wonderful. They just adore them so much.
well,
So
that they're even creating an implied contract or implied trust right there in the courtroom. It's a constructive trust.
well, personal jurisdiction. Thing about the personal jurisdiction is basically a contract. So it's consensual. Jurisdiction over your person doesn't exist unless number one, someone has claimed that a transaction in commerce for trade has occurred. So if that claim hasn't been made, the court does not have personal jurisdiction. So a lot of people don't pay attention. When someone makes a claim, they're usually like, okay, you owe me rent. We have a lease together. Well, that claim's insufficiently pled because you haven't said what did we exchange for trade where one of us or both of us have profited or gained, because it has to be commercial, otherwise personal jurisdiction can't be had, right? So let's just say the person bringing the claim has no standing. You'll find in the court rules that the committee who created the rules says that a judge, if he doesn't have personal jurisdiction, may continue the case from time to time until he gets it. That's
Yes.
implied contract, ain't it?
Yes, and I like that you mentioned standing there, because uh, most people don't even realize that standing and jurisdiction go hand in hand. There's a lot of people, they think that standing means, oh, you've got the power to state a claim for relief, right? Well, standing goes hand in hand with personal jurisdiction,
Yep.
because standing is also, are you in a position that you can be tried, where jurisdiction can be held over you?
Yeah.
And people will go in and they say they want to argue jurisdiction. Well, there's up to 11 different types of jurisdiction. Which one are you trying to argue here? It's like going into an ice cream shop and saying, I want an ice cream cone.
Hmm.
They're going to look at you with a blank look, like, what's wrong with you? Are you all right? What kind do you want?
Exactly.
And so, the judge will ask those people as well, he needs to establish personal jurisdiction, needs to establish standing.
And
Do
it
you have,
can't be presumed. They have to have a hearing on it.
right? And the judge will ask, well, do you have a bank account? That's normally the last thing they ask. And people normally say, well, yeah, but I don't know how much. Okay. They roll right over you and they continue with the case. Um, where do you live? How long have you lived there? Oh, where do you work? Do you file taxes? Well, you're showing in all these spots here where you are participating. And yes, you've established that you have standing, which establishes your personal
Right.
jurisdiction.
Let's talk about that. You said the word participation. What are you participating in? So, if a judge is asking you to come to court and answer to someone's accusations against you, he's conducting a search and a seizure of your person and your papers and your personal effects. So you don't have to be a willing participant who will engage in a search that is self-incriminating in particular. That's why personal jurisdiction is so important to understand. Because like a cop pulling you over the road, most of us know when we read our cases that they come up with a million and one reasons why a cop has the right to engage you, to interrogate you, and to do all the things he does. Well, the courts are never brought, you don't bring a court to court. So we don't have the case law to support what's going on. But inherent in the nature of the court's activity, we call him a trier of fact. During the discovery process, we have to find facts. So, are you willing to participate in an unwarranted search as sanctioned by the court? I'm not. If you think you have enough facts and evidence to sue me, by all means, submit it. But what you're not going to do is use the court to conduct a search to find it. And I'm sure as heck not going to aid you in your investigation. That's just silly. So, personal jurisdiction and understanding the concepts of this is what we're going back to nature law, right? Natural law. If it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck. So, if a judge is asking you questions, he's conducting a search. If he's asking you to answer to a complaint, he's conducting a search. If you file a motion into the court, you are actually filling out an application. A motion is defined as an application to the court. You're asking them for help, or otherwise saying, I'm entering into personal jurisdiction because I need you to protect my person's rights. Or you could file a demurrer and say, I don't need you to protect my rights. I know what my rights are, and I'm perfectly competent to protect my own rights. So let me just tell you how offensive you are in even trying me on this. That's kind of the difference between like a demurrer and a motion. So every time you make a move in that court like this, you are just doing every activity, every action that implies your willingness to partner with the court in protection of your person, your rights, and your property. Do you need it? Sometimes you do. Sometimes people do. Sometimes you don't. But you have to determine that before you proceed, I think. I think it's really huge and really important to do that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a requirement. I want to digress for a second and go back to the contract law issue as well, because so many of the concepts of being able to contract uh, just aren't known by people because they don't study contract law. And that is, and some people, for instance, will say the birth certificate's a contract, right? And they'll say, Well, I wasn't old enough to enter into a contract at that time. You have to be of age, which is a requirement for contract law. You have to be of age to be able to enter into a contract, and of the mental state also to be able to enter into the contract. And so, they'll try and say, "Oh, those contracts don't mean anything. I wasn't old enough." Okay, well, hold on a minute. You had no problem at the age of 15 or 16 contracting with the Department of Motor Vehicles or the BMV or Secretary of State, whatever it is in your case. You had no problem contracting with them and using that contract to be able to participate with road activity. I'll put it that way. So
Safety. That's your beneficial receipt in your participation with the driver community.
Right.
You are enjoying safe roads, and that's what you get for your contributions.
and that kind of cracked me up too with what I've seen over the past couple of years, that looking at the driver's license compact, that word safety is used over and over and over again. But then at the same time, at 15 or 16, you went and got your first job and filled out the IRS paperwork for that first job.
Hypocrisy.
All right. Yeah, right. Hypocrisy at least. But evidently, the state or the federal government had no problem at all contracting with you at 15 or 16 years old to be able to start allowing your employer to act as a withholding agent for your taxes. And I've never seen any case where any of that's been overturned because, they were only 16 years old. They weren't old enough to contract with the IRS yet.
Because the state gives itself exemptions at every corner. That's why. Well, the thing is with child contracts, a adult can actually contract with a child for necessities only. Food,
absolutely.
shelter.
Absolutely. How do you think, it doesn't matter if you go to public school or private school, there's a contract there being done, and that contract is being done by mom and dad because they hold power of attorney over the minor. Yeah. So this whole idea of age and not being old enough, that goes right out the window. People don't stop and think about these little basic things that have occurred through their life where they were supposedly, they claim not old enough, but they were into contracts anyway.
Well, I'll give everyone a tidbit on this. And I just did this for my own kid recently. It's called liability avoidance. A child cannot be held liable on a contract. Absolutely. So all children's contracts are voidable. They're not necessarily void, but they are voidable. So what I did is I designed a contract that my child signed with me, giving me power of attorney over all of his contracting power. He has none. So he has agreed in a written stipulation with me that he will never sign a contract with an adult. And if he does, it's because he was threatened, coerced, or otherwise unduly influenced and didn't feel like he had a choice. That means any contract my child signs from that point forward is voidable because Mama Bear comes in and says, "Oh, no, you don't." So he also agreed to inform me anytime a person makes an offer to him so that I can analyze it to see if the offer is valuable and worth it. Recently, his dean offered him a labor contract for which he said that if my son invested X amount of labor, he would receive a benefit from a company called Owens. I'm not sure really what the benefit is. It didn't define it. So I reached out to the dean and I said, "Look, I have this contract with my son. He's not allowed to sign contracts with you. The reason I did that is to relieve my son of any of the consequences he might receive for being defiant or disobedient to school. He's no longer at fault. It's my fault. Blame me. I'm his mother. I accept liability for anything he does, everything he does at any given time. You don't get to put liability on him. I take it. That's how I help him avoid liability on an obligation."
And that's excellent protection for your offspring. I mean, that's nothing. Some people might see that and immediately think, "Oh, that could harm." No, it doesn't harm them. It actually protects them.
I have his best interest at heart more than anyone in this world.
You brought up a term there as well. And let me say, when I mention term, I'm talking about a legal word. Everybody wants to cry and say, "Oh, they changed all the definitions of the words." No, they didn't. They took certain words and they did what attorneys love doing. They went and changed them. They reclassified them from being a word to being a term, a tool of the legal society. Now it's their tool. They get to define what that term is. When you sign a contract at the end, it doesn't say, do you understand the words of this contract? No, it says, do you agree to the terms of the contract? But you brought up the word fraud there. And one of the
Oh,
things that you see in this movement also
yeah.
is you hear that, oh, fraud vitiates everything. And so
I
then
knew you were
people,
going there.
yeah, and so then people will go and they'll say, oh, this was done in fraud, so therefore it's void.
Yep.
No, there's a big
It's
difference between
voidable.
void and voidable. Exactly. You want to go into void and voidable a little?
Yeah, I think we should because I think this really has people feeling kind of lost. First of all, you got to know what fraud is. Second of all, let me just put it this way. Here's what I hear a lot before we get into that is that people want evidence to support claims and accusations against them. They want a fair and meaningful hearing when someone accuses them of something. Yet they don't want to entitle the party they're accusing of committing fraud to the same. Understand that if you believe the state committed fraud against you, a state actor did something fraudulent, like you, they are the accused. And like you, they are entitled to evidence and a trial to find them guilty of fraud. Just because you magically click your heels and say they committed fraud because you feel it in your heart of hearts isn't going to affect anything. I mean, it might make you feel better to vent it like counseling, but it is not going to do anything. It's not going to help you. You need to collect evidence to support the fact that the fraud was committed. And in order to support fraud like a crime, you have to show motive, intent, and gain on you. Okay, so if you can't even show any of those things, and you need to know what the motive and intent was really, really well. Like this isn't like, oh, I get to make it up in the top of my head because I don't like him. He was acting like an animal, therefore there's the motive. He was angry. Like it doesn't, that's too little. There has to be all those elements first to prove fraud. So
Absolutely.
if an actor takes an action against you that you believe is voidable, your next step to have it deemed void by the court so that no one can come after you for it later would be to first submit your supporting evidence to prove the elements of fraud. You have to show that you were defrauded of what? What did he defraud you of? Money, property? What were you defrauded of? How did we get there? Right? But then you also have to assert the reason my contract, my duties and obligations are automatically discharged is because the contract was void for fraud. I have a sample for you. So read your leases, friends. I got a girlfriend who has a lease, and I was floored to find that inside of that lease, it says that she takes an oath to the public health department and swears that under the public health department code, she will abide by all laws, all regulations, all of executive orders, and she affirms that she knows what all the laws, executive orders are. And then she signs that little thing, not knowing what she just did.
That's an unconscionable contract.
Exactly. But we could say, oh, well, screw you, landlord. It's void. But what's going to happen to us? We're going to get thrown out. That's it. No one's going to listen to that. We have to take it to court. I know everyone wants to avoid court so badly. So I want that for you. I hate that place. But unfortunately, if you don't go to court or do what you have to do to have a court order issued, it's inevitable you are going to get kicked out of your house in this situation. No way around it. I'm sorry. There are no magic solutions here. There are things you can do to avoid to get someone. We got the sheriff in her case to stand down. They refused to execute the judge's order because it was unconstitutional.
That reminds me of a phrase that I heard or read, and I think it came from Abraham Lincoln. And the phrase was, if it's not raised, it's laid.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean if it was, whether it was done in fraud or not, doesn't mean anything. if it's not raised, if it's not brought forward and shown this is what was done, this is how it's incorrect, and therefore it should be overturned, then nothing will be done about it. And you can't do anything yourself just because you want to claim that fraud vitiates everything. Doesn't work that way.
Right. It's
There's
got to be
another,
proven.
right, and there's another big thing that goes along with this as well. Because most court cases all start with an affidavit. Many times, criminal court cases will start with an affidavit from uh, investigators from the police, or FBI or something like that, and that gets handed over to a attorney, district attorney. They look at it, decide whether or not to move forward with the case. Well, if you are bringing forward a case and you say in the case that this person committed fraud against me, they can throw that out. And I'll tell you why. Because you claiming that they committed fraud is a conclusionary statement. You've made a conclusion, a legal conclusion. Well, guess what? You aren't the judiciary. Now you can say, this individual tricked me, or they misrepresented themselves, things like that. But you can't go and bring up a conclusionary statement like saying basically if they've been convicted of a crime that they haven't been convicted of yet. And a
Right.
lot of
Yeah.
times they'll throw those right out.
Even you look at reporters do this all the time. They never say, "Hey, this guy did that." They say allegedly.
Allegedly, and that's the
Allegedly.
reason. Yeah, that's the reason why.
Yeah.
Now you could say, I have reason to believe that they defrauded me, something like that.
Or it is
Which would be
apparent that they may have defrauded me.
right.
More impactful, right?
Right, but you cannot make a conclusionary statement like that. And some people wonder why their stuff gets thrown out. Well, that's one of those reasons why things get thrown out or ignored. And and on top of it, guess what? They don't have to respond to everything that they're given either.
No.
That's a big one. That's a big one right there that
Not
everybody says,
always.
oh, they never answered me. So therefore, since they didn't answer within the 10 days that I gave them, that it stands as truth in commerce. And in fact, they don't even say that.
I don't think anyone's actually reading when they say when you repeat these things, and I'm thinking it over because I've heard these same things. I don't think anyone's reading. You have to read further than one paragraph of a law to comprehend it in its entirety. There are always exceptions, always. So if acquiescence is admission in some cases, there are going to be exceptions where acquiescence is not construed to be that. I have court case law that says if the court does not answer, it means nothing. It is not acceptance and it is not admission.
Right. The same thing happens even within the court system itself between I would say the justices, but that's not true. Justices are strictly Supreme Court office holders, but between the judges, where this will happen, especially in appellate court, where an appeals is done and somebody is appealing a case and it gets sent up the chain to the next highest court for an appeal. They have a certain amount of time, according to their state law, to answer that appeal. Well, guess what? If they don't answer that appeal within that required amount of time, it evaporates, it disappears. And those people have to go then again and turn around and submit the appeal another time to them.
And they're done that.
Yep. And so for this idea that if they don't answer the affidavit or whatever, that it stands as truth, no, that's not the case at all.
Look, we can think about all those questions that appear in the top of our heads in like 10 seconds flat, because that's how frequently these kinds of questions are asked.
Right.
But when such little topics, but big, severe consequences.
Oh, absolutely. And when I hear these so-called teachers, saying these things and telling people this stuff and people go and run with it, I mean, these are the people that you see get their car windows smashed, tased, and dragged out of their car the whole time that they're
Yeah.
screaming, "I do not consent! I do not consent! I do not
Oh,
consent!"
yeah, we know
Be-
that.
because those people listen to those teachers that were telling them these
Oh,
things.
oh, that's
But
awful.
we're not telling the whole truth. I mean, here's another little good one, and something you mentioned, Trey, reminded me of it, was that word law. And you're talking about people need to read the whole law.
Please
Well, people are like,
continue.
well, wait a minute. They're just citing a statute, and statute isn't law. Okay, that
Mm,
shows how little research the people have done, because where do statutes come from? The statutes, like in United States Code, or those code, the codification that you're reading there, you can go actually online, and there's a PDF from an article somebody wrote that said that statutes are prima facie evidence of law. And a lot of people might not know what that means. Prima facie is kind of like on its face.
yeah, I think
It's
people
showing,
don't comprehend that well.
right? It's showing that law exists. So where do these codes and statutes come from? These are all codified from what's called public law when it's coming from like Congress. And it may be a large body of work, but what they've gone and done is taking a snippet out of it that is concise, that can be used in certain situations, and they've codified it and turned it into, USC number whatever, or
Provisions of
or
law.
state code whatever. Yeah, these are provisions of law. And
Mhm.
so, you want to go back also, and maybe not just read that statute that they're using, but go back to the public law that it was derived from, because sometimes they don't show quite the whole picture there, and you can benefit
Most
yourself
of the
that way.
time. Yeah, most of the time.
Uh,
But again, even if you aren't able to read all of it, maybe you don't have the time, maybe you're in a pinch, right? I rely on natural law frequently, and it usually turns out pretty good if you understand the law of nature well, like we were talking about before. So, a presumption of duty. The very first question I always tell people to say to themselves: did I really have a duty? Was I assigned the duty in writing? Was I appointed a seat of office? Was I given specific means by which I could perform that duty from the other party, such as in your driver's code? If you go to public law and driver's code, you will find what your duties are. It doesn't tell you in the statute. In the public law, it tells you that your duty is to pull over to the shoulder when you see emergency lights so that the emergency vehicle with the lights on may pass. What isn't your duty? To invite the cop to your car, to stand at the shoulder waiting for his approach. It's not in there, it's nowhere to be found. So, what is my duty when in that circumstance, under the public law in my state, it says specifically to pull over and let the guy pass? I have faithfully discharged my duty when I've done that. He cannot ask me to do anything more than what I've done, such as invite him for a investigation or help with some problem I might be having, such as a tail light out. So you have to read the public law. I'm glad you mentioned it. I never see people post it ever, ever. Everyone relies on statute alone.
and as long as we're on the topic of law, because for me, when I first started researching, this was a big stumbling block that I ran across. And the reason why it was such a big stumbling block was because, it was like asking three rabbis in a room a question and getting six different answers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nobody had the same answer. And this is regarding common law. And what the heck is common law? And we were talking about natural law. I notice a lot of people confuse natural law for common law.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
a lot of people, if you pin them down
Mhm.
on common law, they'll tell you it means do no harm. Well, okay, that sounds really nice and everything, but uh, that's not really what common law is. And so many people want to, I have seen this so many times, videos of people wanting to invoke common law in their court case.
No,
And
you don't.
yeah, but I've never seen a judge turn them down.
Of course not. Why
So,
would he? It's to his
so
benefit.
now you and I haven't had this conversation, and I know what I would say, but what say you, Trey? What is common law?
So, well, let's look at the word common. It is for someone who is a commoner. Where does it derive from? Britain. We're not British people. Let me just put that out there, but let me back up. The king incorporated common law into the system because he was pissed off at the people. The people stopped working because they were too busy fighting each other. And because the king wanted to mind his own damn business, let his people be free, he wasn't getting any productivity or revenue from the people because they were too busy having controversies and fighting each other. So he incorporated the common law system to help those people resolve those controversies amongst each other, thereby creating peace amongst them. They were happy, and when they were happy, they were good slaves. Happy slaves are hardworking slaves. That's what the common law comes from.
And people think that common law, maybe because the word is common, is that it's the same everywhere. No, it absolutely is not the same everywhere. Thank goodness,
Mhm.
because common law, number one, like you said, the word common, it's what's common to a people. So that means that your common law in Ohio is not going to be the same common law as if you were in Afghanistan or Iraq.
Mhm.
Over there, it might be Sharia law. You know what I mean? So, yeah,
We could do an entire show on this because understand too, people, that common law is statutory law. Just
yeah,
so you know,
absolutely. Yeah,
the
statutory.
statutes reflect what people are commonly offended by. We know this because cases go to controversy because people complain. If the people keep complaining about one particular conflict or another, now we've developed a body of evidence to say we need to stop these people from doing this to each other. And that is what gets codified. All of your compiled case law is your common law codified in statute.
And
You look
where
weird
does
when you're saying common law when they're using common law.
right? And where does this common law that's derived from the public law of Congress come from? It originates most generally from treaties and from court cases, the things that are common to a land. So
Mhm.
go out and invoke common law all you want and see how it ends up, because this is,
Yep.
like I said, watching things using like a scientific method, like, is it
You're
measurable?
surrendering to the court when you use common law too.
Absolutely. So like I say, using the scientific method of looking to see what's measurable, observable, and repeatable, and looking at all these situations where like common law was being invoked, look and see how it turned out for the people,
Mhm.
because it always turns out the same way. Not
There it is.
exactly, and it's not the way those people thought it was going to turn out for them by trying to invoke common law.
Mhm. John says English equity blended with local customs. Absolutely.
There you go.
Absolutely. If it is customarily practiced amongst the commoners are what? Dumb people. Okay. If it's customarily practiced amongst the commoners and you're one of them, then you must share the same belief as the commoners that you are guilty of what the judge is accusing you of. You must
Well,
also share the common belief that the judge is the authority too. So why are you invoking this? This makes no sense.
Well, people don't realize this, but next week, Trey and I were going to discuss spirituality and law a little bit. But when you bring up, like this word, the commoners, it automatically makes me stop and think, wait a minute. In scripture, weren't the people supposed to be a peculiar people, a set apart people? That's definitely not a commoner.
No, commoner and communism are the same thing.
Yeah.
Commune, community, communism. They're all the same thing. So when you say common, what you're saying is I'm a member of a community who shares in like beliefs and customs and practices. I want to be treated as though I am the same as everybody else, not like Brian just said, set
Yeah,
apart. individual.
Okay, so let's stop and really look at this, which is cracking me up. If you go in and you are invoking common law for a case, you are invoking communism.
You're asking the Nazis to help you out. And
Yes.
that's it's funny, but it's true, because isn't that what the Germans did?
Yeah, please put that boot
It's
on my
not so
neck a little bit
far-fetched.
lighter. Don't
It's,
step so
yeah,
hard on my neck.
it's not so far-fetched. Look at Venezuela right now. Today Venezuela it went from a thriving economic bull, and they were very similar to us, and now they are starving to death and trying to escape their country to find a place where they can just basically barely live. Like, they are dying over there. They're scraping gold from their necklaces and stuff and starting to create their own exchange system, because they don't have any way of getting goods and services. This is
And
today this is happening.
I'll tell you what, right now, because I know pretty much the group of people that generally listen to these calls and to this type of information, across the board with all different channels and stuff. And so right now, I can hear people in the background screaming, no, that's not the way it is. It's like this.
Oh, they
Well,
love their common law. I know it.
oh, well, you know what? I'm sorry. You keep riding with that and see where it gets you. I like the statement Mark Twain made. He said, it's not what you think you know for sure that gets you into trouble. It's what you think you know that just isn't so.
Truth. Nice, Mark. We appreciate that one.
But that's a big one right there. I mean, that's really
Well,
lays at the bottom of so much of this. And I see people defending what I call this guru guano over and over again. But you know what? One of the things I looked at also when I started researching, one of the first things you stumble across is like the Patriot movement. And I looked at a lot of the legal things that were being tried within the Patriot movement. And then I looked at the results. The results across the board were either they end up dying in prison or alongside the road somewhere due to an activity they were involved in. So is that the direction I want to go in? No, thank you.
no,
Absolutely
typically
not.
you follow the successful guy.
Yeah, let's go look for the successful people.
Hmm.
And now here's the situation also. When you look for the successful people and the successful things, a lot of people turn their nose up at it because they want to see these court battles. They want to see these fights going on and stuff. But I'm sorry, if you're successful, those things don't occur. And that's what you're going after. You're trying to come to a position where your life is mellow. You're not having these troubles. You're being
Peace.
left alone.
Yeah,
You
peace.
know, you're at
Nothing better.
peace.
Absolutely.
And
And let
that's the
me just
only.
throw out there too, just because I know you're right that these people are going to be upset about what I'm saying, but if we can all agree, and I think we all agree, that most of what they speak to us is Latin, and that the law is written in Latin, and I'm actually going to go over some of that in a future cast with Brian. But without getting too deep into it here, the term, the suffix comira, come, comelo, okay? Latin and Spanish, anyone who's taken Spanish class, you're going to understand these concepts. The term com itself means with, together, inward, all combined, right? Combined. So what is a community? A bunch of people together. What is a communism then? A bunch of people together. So what is a common law? When you are with someone, standing together with a bunch of people believing in the same concepts. Common.
The law that affects all of us.
Mm. Yeah, it not only does it affect it, because com means with, as in I accept it.
Yes.
If Brian likes it, I like it too, because I'm just like Brian.
That's why you are allowed to protest. Go to the state capitol and protest all day long, all you want. They don't care because
Right.
protesting is an actual right that you have. But also within protesting, it is also a form of acceptance. You're not just saying, "Oh, I'm fighting against, this statute or this law, this ordinance." No, what you're doing is you're basically saying, "I don't like this statute or law or ordinance, but I accept it."
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. The best way is to ignore a law. If a law comes out and no one follows it or abides by it, whatever. I don't know if they did it in all states, but like here they did a sugar tax, I think it was, or a Pepsi, a Coke. I think it was sugar tax. Nobody was willing to pay it. Nobody. So they couldn't enforce it. You basically you're putting all of the sugar companies under because we vote through our dollar.
That's
If
called peaceful rebellion.
Exactly. If you don't like it, you won't buy it. And if you don't buy it, they can't put companies under the ground. They're gonna get rid of it. Believe
And
me,
that
it will resurface though.
right, it will resurface, but and they'll try and sneak it in a different form. But those
Absolutely.
are the only types of things that work, which is a peaceful rebellion. You have to come in peace, leave in peace, whatever the case may be. It has to be peace. I mean, you look at any of the documents from the United Nations, and peace is used over and over again. That's the reason, for instance, for war. What do they want to use war for? They're using war to attain a long and sustained peace. Unfortunately, their version of peace is you complying with them.
Shut up and get along.
Exactly.
Shut up and get along, little doggy. That's all you get.
Okay, well, we could go on with many more of these little things that you run across in the truth or patriot movement or whatever you want to call this as. But since, one of the real popular things going on, again, that's resurfacing, is the whole W-9 process. And what frustrated me looking at, this probably falls under as well, tax protesters. That was really big in the 70s. And we saw people like, Adam Schiff or whatever die in prison, handcuffed to their bed. They never got anywhere with these things. And why I was like, okay, let's look for the successful people. You know what I mean? And I just saw a lot of wheels spinning without a lot of success, mostly probably because these people weren't using this in the correct way. I think whatever a lot of people are looking for, they're looking for a free ride. They're looking for that gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah.
So to me, this is the gold nugget. This is the gold at the end of the rainbow here. We'll close this episode out with this. But this whole W-9 process, and the question is, what are you really trying to accomplish, and how can it be done successfully, and how is it used successfully, and why is it successful? I'll let you touch on that, Trey.
So I think this is, I hate to talk to you. This is not me talking to you like this because this threw me for a loop. I found out like a week ago that people think when they're in their office with their employer, they're paying taxes. You're not, people. When you talk to tax guy, fill out your forms, you're not paying taxes. Okay? This is a withholding. They're not keeping it. What they're doing is they're holding it just in case you owe taxes. So you don't run away and they don't get their money before you run away, then they're going to be mad, right? This is not you paying taxes. So I think there's some confusion here, and I don't know where it comes from or why, but a lot of people their entire lives have paid tax preparers. So this isn't for people who understand, but this is for people who are like, oh crap, I didn't know that, because I heard this and it blew me away. But this is a withholding. Your employer has partnered with the state to secure the state's money owed to them on taxable incomes. So they're going to hold that, and basically they act as your fiduciary in that circumstance, where they are also making sure that you don't get in trouble in case your accounting is bad. So we have a partnership here between myself, my employer, and the state.
Trey, let me tag something onto that really quick, because I have people ask me, they'll be like, well, don't you pay taxes, Brian? And I tell them, no. And they say, well, what do you mean? Let me see your check stub. You mean there's no taxes taken out of your paycheck? And they don't comprehend this aspect of, that's why I say people need to know how all the moving parts operate.
Yeah.
And this is how the moving parts operate. That money being taken out of your taxes isn't you paying taxes. Things don't happen until things are finished and settled at the end of the year. This is just a withholding. And
Yeah.
action that's happening right now. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and you know what? Sometimes because we're all invested in this for such a long time, we forget that there might be small little things like this that we know, but other people don't. Like we overlook these things. So for those of them out there, if they're listening, a withholding is done. It's basically a collateral attachment to your agreement to report to. Okay, you don't have a duty to pay taxes. Your duty is to report. Your duty is to tell them if you earned an income and how much that income was and all that good stuff. Your duty isn't to pay. Your duty is to report here. So they're holding your money as collateral to assure that you send that report in so that they can investigate or search your accounting information to make sure you're not skipping out on them on something you might owe. But the tax system isn't designed to take money for the state, because that wouldn't be to your benefit. They can't do anything that's not to your benefit. It's actually to return back to you money that is owed to you from the state, which is why it's called a tax return. It's why you're obligated to report, because how can the state return back to you the money they owe you from your withholdings if you don't tell them anything? You got to look at it from a whole new perspective. And then stuff that you're reading will start to make more sense, such as the W-9. Corporations, people, work with me. Corporations. Corporation is a general term and a category. Underneath the corporation term are several subcategories of what counts for a corporation, such as a partnership, a nonprofit organization. All that means is that a bunch of people have incorporated into their customs and their practice the moral policy of that particular organized body.
Trey, people need to do something as well while you're saying this. While you're mentioning corporation there. Tag this to it as well, because we didn't touch on this. One of the other big issues under frequently asked questions people run into is that word person. And they all come out and say, oh, you're a corporation. They made you into a corporation. Number one,
no.
corporations have officers, they have bylaws, they have regular meetings, and most importantly is that they are not recognized until their letters of incorporation are filed. This is law. This is not something that I'm making up out of the top of my head like Anna von Reitz or anything like that.
There's
Okay.
no wicked man going to come pull you under the ground.
And if you were a corporation, you would be in a totally different tax category. You would be paying maybe upwards of 35% in taxes every single year. So that should tell you right there, no, they did not make you into a corporation. They did not make you into a debt entity. You can't take the word corporation. People take the word corporation, and
I think they're confusing it with the term business.
All right. Well, I hear people say, well, corporation, they'll go and they'll take that word corp and they'll say, oh, that's derived from the word corpse. No, it's not.
Oh, yeah, I forgot
corpse,
about that. I haven't done it in a while.
A dead body, corpse, is derived from the word corp. Corp is the root word, not corpse. All right. Corp just means body of people. That's it. Or body. That's all it means.
I didn't even know that. I learned that today from you. It's what it means.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, right. And these are things.
Something new every single day. All of
No, stop it. These are all things that we know, but we overlook it until we start seeing people spout this out to everybody, saying, "Oh, they made you into a corporation." Well, number one, also on top of it, they want to say, since they made you into a corporation, you're a dead entity. Well, a corporation has never been alive. It's a piece of paper. It's what's called an artificial entity. Something that's artificial can never be alive, and so therefore can never be dead. All right. So if they thought you were a corporation, which is a dead entity, then they wouldn't feed you those freaking rotten freaking bologna sandwiches and cold egg sandwiches when you go to jail. All right.
You just die.
Corporations don't need food. All right. Anyway, go ahead with the W-9, Trey. Sorry.
Okay. Well, you do kind of have to understand your positioning before you even consider using it. Like I said, so I brought this up with someone today that so the person thing, right? They'll say like it could be an individual, a partnership, and therefore we're not the same. Step back, people. First of all, if you're filling out a W-9, it is because you are not an employee. It is because you are a partner, an independent contractor who is advancing an interest with another party for a similar and shared purpose and goal and mission. Okay? Simple stuff. This is not hard. Now, an individual is a singular person who is going to do what? Sole proprietorship, or your other choice would be subcontractor status. So when they say individual, that's what they're talking about commercially. Either you are in a partnership with the state because you registered something with the state, you're individual doing business with the state, or you are a partner, which could have several other partners inside of that, but each of you act as an individual within that big scope of your so-called corporation. An independent contractor might say receive payment for his services through a technology company because he's a data processor or something, right? When he's the guy who gets the W-9, okay? He's the one who is saying, I received payment from ABC company to give them my skill set and my services for a wage. And this is how much they gave me as a payment for my services. When you do your W-9s, the reason it is the partnership with the state I look at. Okay, let me give you an example. The United States unionized and incorporated all the other states under its scope to share and advance the interests that they all have shared together, which is to defend the outside borders, right? It's one thing. We'll just focus on, want to keep it simple. Interior states have every interest in exterior states' borders being secured so that we don't get pummeled by someone via sea or air. That's why they incorporated with the United States in order to unionize, right? Unify, come together as one to advance that specific shared interest. This is what it means to corporate or incorporate or be a corporation. Whether you're looking at it from the state perspective or the business perspective or the individual contractor perspective, all three categories are going to have some characteristic differences. So back to the W-9 and the independent contractor status. If you are going to be an independent contractor who is claiming that you earned an income, or if you are sending a W-9 to receive the taxpayer identifier number from a servicer who serviced you and you paid them an income, you don't need to do any other forms. You don't need to do any other processes. It stops there. Don't complicate it, okay? So, for example, and this one's going to blow your hair back, kids, get ready. ComEd Services in Illinois is our electric provider. It is a public utility. And if you look at my bill that I have before me, you would see it was $47. Flip that sucker over on the back and you will see customer charges are $8.38. What does the customer owe?
$8.38.
What's the rest of these 37 some odd dollars for? Oh, there's the trick.
There's your W-9.
Right. You contribute to the cost of maintenance and repair of the electric company's services and equipment because we are participants in providing electric services to everyone. Equity, equality, in particularly the impoverished. So in order to keep ComEd going for an entire year's worth of fiscal year specifically, right, we need to assure it stays in good repair. Because if it fails, we all lose. And the people who are relying on that service will not get that service. So I contribute a share of my money to ComEd in addition to paying them my customer charge and the $5 service charge a month. So at the end of my year, I am sending ComEd a W-9 to get their EIN, and then I'm going to get my adversary to agree, people, right? I'm going to get them to agree that I gave them $5 a month in service fees, and therefore that $5 per month in service fee is an income they received from me as an independent contractor. Why am I an independent contractor with ComEd? Because I partnered with them as a contributor to assure safe delivery of services to my entire community. I'm an investor in that sense. And I am entitled to a return on that investment just like anybody else. Make sense?
There you
And
go.
that's why you have a tax return and not an order to pay a tax. Makes more sense than what you're hearing, I'm sure of it. But we will dive into that at some point in the future where I can actually show you, because we're doing like a general gist of things here today. Here's the thing. I've seen people actually get threatened with arrest and worse when you send these types of stuff to people. You think it's innocent and harmless. It's not. There is actually something out there right now with the IRS that says they will not consider you innocent if you send them frivolous paperwork and documents. And they will consider it fraud, and they will charge you with fraud, which is a felony, friends. So before you do something like this, reconsider, reevaluate, think it over, do some reading. In addition to that, I've seen people also be accused of legal threatening. That's a real charge, friends. So don't go out accusing people. You owe me. You did this. You caused me to suffer a loss of that. Do not do this. Because if someone wants to make an example of you, that is also a criminal charge. And they can tell you that you are legally threatening them and put your butt in jail. Not suggesting you don't do what you want. It's free will. But what I am suggesting is analyze the risk and what's the benefit here. If it's not worth it, don't do it. Very, very simple. What do you think, Brian?
Absolutely, and that's excellent. It's a good way to close out. Let me add as well that people messing around with these things also. When I talk about looking at the scientific method, one of these things that I see repeatable that keep occurring is these people also get an identical charge as the rest of them, and that is interfering with securities of the United States government.
Oh, yeah.
Not something that I would necessarily want to see.
No. Yeah, that actually sounds more scary than any other. Like, usually if you're doing these things, it's within your state. When you piss off the Fed, that is, to me, I'm petrified of that, actually. I don't mess with the Fed. I just don't.
Use these things the way they are set up to be used. Don't be trying to reinvent the wheel.
Not to mention, they're set up for ease of use. This is the mind-boggling part. You're trying to do like 20 different things where all you're actually really required to do is like 2 things to accomplish what I believe to be a better outcome, right? You're going to get a return on the monies you've paid to everyone who you contracted with for service. By the time you're done collecting all the service fees from all the people in that year, pretty much you're not going to end up paying anything on your taxes. That's not a bad result. Like, why not?
Oh,
Why not?
Jay, I think you're forgetting to tell people a couple things though. When you're sending that into them, you have to go and put a red fox stamp on it and sign across it at a 45-degree angle in red, don't you?
Only after I spin around 3 times, click my heels, and slap you right upside your head. Oh no. And then what happens when it doesn't work for you? You didn't angle it exactly at that 360, or your stamp wasn't placed precisely in that spot, or you didn't do precisely what I said, and it was your fault because you weren't listening and you're too stupid to do it.
That's right. You can go to the dollar store and get a rule and compass and make sure that thing's at a 45-degree angle,
Oh,
doggone it.
no, 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 no. You can do that. Like, I wouldn't stop you. I mean, be my guest if you feel like it just makes you feel secure and safe. I mean, whatever. But in all honesty, you don't have to, and it will still work.
Yeah. And don't contact us to put money on your books afterwards in jail either, please.
Wow. Lord have mercy. No commissary for you.
Yeah, no commissary for you. Sorry. You used the wrong red fox stamp.
Yeah, I think it's just super. It's like, why, if you're willing to invest your time in measuring and figuring out like 5 different areas of law, because now you're learning postal code, now you're learning contract law, you're learning archaic law, and you're learning about tax law. Geez Louise, you must be tired when all you ever had to do was read the damn tax law. This is real easy right here. This is not complex stuff. Like, why are you reading all this when all you needed to do was read the tax code? Don't overthink it. Keep it simple. It's
Well,
not hard.
if everybody would just become a postmaster general and a secured party creditor, life would be
Oh,
so much easier, wouldn't it?
well, let me tell you a little tidbit. I'll share with you guys more later so we don't drag this out. But guess how you become a secured party creditor? I can tell you in 5 minutes and not in 5 years. How exciting! Think bankruptcy, friends.
There you
What is
go.
your mortgager versus your credit card? They have a secured debt. Your credit card does not. Therefore, they are the secured party creditor. Do you know why that is? Because they have collateral and the credit card company doesn't.
It's called a security interest.
Exactly. That makes you a secured party in each individual transaction you so choose to be. So sometimes you can be the secured party creditor, and you don't always have to be. But in all times, because of the Consumer Protection Act, you are always the secured party creditor because the state secures the transaction most favorable in the light of the consumer. The state is selling you securities. That's why you're paying taxes, right?
Yep.
Landlord is the best concept. Does he not give my state 6% of the amount he receives from income? Now I'm the payee. I paid him $1,000 a month. However, the state took a 6% share of what I paid him. So ultimately, didn't the state receive the money from me?
Correct.
So I'm the secured party because that 6% represents the amount that the state is taking for its security to me, such as an automatic renewal contract that the law protects, such as court services to provide me with a place to resolve a controversy, to recover my losses and my damages. That's a security. They call it a security. I call it insurance, but I think those are like the same things. But
And
to
if you
simplify, I call it insurance.
and if you want to do what you're supposed to do, and if you're not afraid of getting thrown out on the street, you can go and do the 1099 with him and get his EIN number to make sure that the state is receiving the funds they're supposed to receive from your money.
Yep, because the state and the court and is the state, it cannot aid someone who is operating in bad faith. If he didn't pay his taxes on his income and tries to bring a claim against you, isn't he operating in bad faith?
Correct. And
Yeah.
hey, this will probably be for next week, but bad faith and clean hands. That's in
Yes.
the scripture too.
Oh, it is. Absolutely agreed 100%. But yeah, we can go into details more. Maybe you should probably segment stuff because you don't realize how in depth a subject will be until you're into it.
Yeah.
So go
Well,
for it.
that's why these are recorded. People can stop, take notes, go back, listen again.
Nice and
uh,
easy.
Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks for being here tonight, Trey.
You're welcome.
And let's get into the spiritual side next week.
Let's do it. And so next week I'm gonna show you precisely how to correlate specific scripture to specific statute. It's very cool stuff. I'm super nerd, so maybe other people find that boring, but I think it's really, really cool. Little hint, go to your criminal code and you will find Psalms is actually cited in it under juvenile parts of it. Hint, not going to tell you where. I'm going to show you guys next week.
Absolutely. Well, and until next week, like I tell people every week, learn who you really are, where you're really from, and where you're really at, because that's where the deception lays. Good night, guys.
Night.